Jeffersons by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley, a First Chapter Friday read aloud video with the Word Nerd. Today, as you listen, play along. Watch for the story quote that will appear on screen. Write it down, word by word, and then follow the instructions given to you by your teacher. Make sure you stick around all the way to the end to see if you've written it down correctly. Hi, my name is Amanda Zieba. Welcome to my channel, Learning with the Word Nerd, and another First Chapter Friday video. This week, I'm going to be reading to you from Jefferson's Sons by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley, who is one of my favorite authors on the planet. I don't know if this is Kimberly's first book that she wrote, but it's the first one that I read of hers. And you can tell how much I loved it because I have Post-it notes coming out the wazoo of this book because the writing is just so beautiful and there are so many just tactically wonderful things that she did as a writer that I wanted to learn from. And so lots of underlinings and a little reminder to you that if you are reading a book and it's really grabbing your attention or you're really falling in love with what you see on the page, pay attention to that. Try to figure out, why is it that I like that thing? How could I do that in my own writing? As readers, we are learning how to be better writers. And if that's a goal that you have for yourself, the way that I do, this book is going to be just such a treat for you. Let me read you the back so you know what the story is about, and then we will dig into chapter 1. Beverly, Harriet, Madison, and Eston are Thomas Jefferson's children, but their mother is a slave, so they must keep their father's identity secret. They get special treatment, better work, better shoes, even violin lessons, but still, they are slaves. Their father has promised to set them all free when each turns 21. Some of them are light-skinned enough that they will be able to enter white society and thereby turn their backs on home forever. Others won't have that option. So just what did their father mean when he wrote that all men are created equal? This book is an excellent book for us to read and to learn from, especially during February, Black History Month. That's why I chose to read it this month. Um, and gives us lots of big, important things and feelings to think about, in addition to just being a fantastic story. So let us get right into it. Jefferson's Sons, Chapter 1, The Violin by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. This chapter is taking place in spring of 1805. It was April, and all Monticello was stirring. But in their cabin, Mama had just put baby Maddie down to sleep, and she told Beverly and Harriet to be still. Beverly did not want to be still. I'll also note Beverly, although I typically think of it as a female name in this story and setting, Beverly is a male name. Beverly did not want to be still. Harriet reached under the bed for the box where she kept things and pulled out the sampler Mama was teaching her to sew. Beverly knew what would happen next. Harriet and Mama would talk sewing and ignore him. He aimed a kick at his little sister. "Don't do that," he said. "Let's do something fun." Harriet sat down on the stool beside the hearth. She beamed at Mama with what Beverly called her good girl smile, like she was trying to show off how sweet she was. Harriet was almost 4 years old. She was not a sit-still little girl, but sometimes she took a mood to act like one. Beverly reached out with his foot again. His toe grazed the end of one of Harriet's braids, and Harriet screeched. "Beverly," Mama said, not even looking up, "don't wake your brother." "I didn't yell," Beverly said. "Harriet did." "And you're the one looking for trouble," Mama replied. "Do you need something to do?" Beverly knew better than to say yes. Mama would make him do chores. "No, ma'am," he said. "I guess I'll go visit Uncle Peter." "Don't you bother him neither," Mama said, but she let him go. Beverly went out of the cabin and down Mulberry Row. The spring wind whipped the still bare branches of the mulberry trees. The packed dirt road felt cool and firm beneath his bare feet. Beverly spread his arms into the wild wind. He felt wild, too. The kitchen was halfway down the row in the basement of a little brick guest house. Uncle Peter, one of Mama's brothers, was the cook. Uncle Peter didn't hand out treats very often, but you never knew. It was mid-morning. If the folks in the great house hadn't been hungry at breakfast, there might be muffins left over. Beverly slid through the open door. On the hearth, Dutch oven steamed in a row over piles of coals. Uncle Peter and the two girls that helped him stood behind the long table chopping vegetables. Uncle Peter gave Beverly an eye. "What do you want?" he asked. "Nothing," Beverly said. He edged closer to the table. There were muffins left over, and slices of ham, too. Uncle Peter whapped Beverly's hand with the end of a towel, and the girls laughed. "Get out of here, Beverly," Uncle Peter said. "2 hours since breakfast. You can't be hungry yet." "Can too," Beverly said, but he went. Outside, the wind still howled. Beverly stopped and thought about what he wanted to do. He was too little to have a real job. Most days he helped Mama while she sewed in the cabin or visited his aunts and uncles and ran around the gardens or the orchards. Sometimes he walked with Mama to the great house where she checked to see that everything in Master Jefferson's room was all right. Master Jefferson spent most of the year in Washington. When he was gone, the great house stood empty. Besides taking care of Beverly and Harriet and Mattie, Mama didn't have much to do. Now Master Jefferson was home for a month, and everything had changed. He'd brought his grown-up daughter and all her children with him, and invited friends to visit, so the house was full to bursting. Mamma worked and worked. What's more, she stayed up at the great house every night. Beverly didn't mind the bustle, but whenever he thought about Master Jefferson, his stomach gave a little twist, almost like he was hungry. It twisted now. He wished Uncle Peter had given him a muffin. He looked to his left toward the workshop. His Uncle John worked there, learning fancy carpentry from a white Irishman named Mr. Dismore. Beverly loved Uncle John, and he loved watching him make things out of wood, but he wasn't sure how he felt about Mr. Dismore. Unlike the overseers, Mr. Dismore was cheerful and funny, but he also sometimes said things like, "I don't want you pickaninnies hanging around my shop." Beverly hated the word pickaninny. It sounded like something you'd stomp on if you saw it running across the floor. He was not, he thought, a pickaninny. Straight across the road was a smokehouse, locked so the hams couldn't grow legs and wander away. To the right was a blacksmith shop. Beverly often went there to watch the nail boys work. He knew he'd be a nail boy himself when he was older. The nail boys made nails all day long. Tap, tap, tap. They cut nail rods into short pieces and then hammered one end of each piece long and pointy and the other square and firm. The nail boys' muscles stood out on their arms. Master Jefferson was very proud of them. The only problem with visiting the blacksmith shop was Mr. Stewart. He was head blacksmith, a white man, and mean when he was drunk. Lately he stayed drunk all the time. Only yesterday Master Jefferson's daughter, Miss Martha, said it was about time she took matters into her own hands and showed Mr. Stewart the door before he grew careless in his inebriation and burned the blacksmith ship down. She said it was a good thing they had Joe Fawcett, or that place would be a ruin. Beverly'd heard her. He was good at hearing things. "If you're smart," Mama often told him, "you'll keep your mouth shut and your ears open. You're a smart boy, aren't you?" "Yes, ma'am," he'd say, proud that it was true. Beverly loved the word inebriation, even though Mama said it was just a fancy name for drunk. Beverly savored beautiful words. They were like music in his head. He didn't care what the words meant nearly as much as how they sounded. He loved it when Mama and Miss Martha spoke French together, even though they only did it so no one else could understand them. "Teach me," he begged Mama, "teach me how to talk like that." Mama taught him a song in French and how to say "I love you, Mama," but she said she didn't have time to teach him more, and besides, it would upset Miss Martha. No good ever came from upsetting Miss Martha. Miss Martha's full name was Mrs. Martha Randolph. She was the only one of Mama's children still alive. She was the only one of her Mama's children still alive. She loved to come to Monticello and act like the boss of everything, but she wasn't the real boss. Master Jefferson was, and she wasn't there very often. Beverly didn't care if he upset her or not. When he said so, Mama shook her head. "Trust me," she said. "It's better to stay on her good side." "Does she have a good side?" asked Beverly. For a moment Mama looked like she might laugh, but then she set her lips together and told Beverly not to act like he was too big for his britches. She said everyone had a good side, even with some folks if you had to look mighty hard to find it. She told him again that smart boys kept their mouths shut. Was Beverly listening? Beverly was. He wondered where Miss Martha kept her good side. On the sole of her left foot, maybe. Safe inside her shoe. Miss Martha was 2 years older than Mama. Once upon a time, after Master Jefferson's wife died, but when Miss Martha was still just a girl, Master Jefferson and Miss Martha went to live in France. After a few years, they sent for Master Jefferson's other daughter, Miss Maria, who was still alive back then, but little and scared. Beverly's mama was just 14 years old, but she got the job of taking Miss Maria on a ship across the wide ocean to France. They all lived in Paris for 3 more years. That was where Mama learned French. Miss Maria grew up, married a nice man, had a son, and died. Mama told Beverly that. Miss Martha grew up, married a loud, angry man, and had too many children. She walked around like she'd just tasted sour milk. Mama didn't have to tell Beverly that. He could see it for himself. Beverly had two dead sisters and one dead brother. He couldn't remember any of them, but Mama told him and Harriet about them because she said it was important to keep their stories alive. Family counted, living or dead. Baby Madison seemed healthy, Mama said, but you never knew for sure. One of the dead sisters had lived for over a year, walked and talked and everything. Beverly looked out over the blacksmith shop, past the gardens, and down the mountainside. He sighed. There was only one place he wanted to go. He knew it, and he might as well go there. He lifted his chin and tried to look like a boy with an important errand to do, not one sneaking off where he didn't belong. He went to the great house. It was in pieces. It had been a fine big house, but not fine or big enough to suit Master Jefferson. He'd hired workmen to rip the walls open and add rooms off the long sides and remove the roof and add a third floor, and right now the workers was about half finished. To live there you had to not mind dust and dirt and no roof and holes in the walls. Master Jefferson didn't mind. Miss Martha did, but she was there anyway because she preferred a house with no roof away from her husband to one with the to a roof to one with the roof and her husband inside. Beverly's cousin Burwell was the butler whenever Master Jefferson was at home. Burwell hated mess even more than Miss Martha did, but he didn't have any say. He just had to cope the best he could. Master Jefferson expected a fancy dinner on the clean tablecloth with china and silver and lots of good wine. Every afternoon at exactly 3 o'clock, whether there was a roof over the house or not, Burwell always managed to make everything just right. I'll go see Burwell, Beverly told himself. He'll let me polish spoons. But he knew Burwell wasn't the person he wanted to see. He slipped between the poplar trunks supporting the unfinished porch and through the back door into the great house. Upstairs, a baby wailed. Beverly heard footsteps hurrying across the hall. Burwell's dining room was to the left, but Beverly turned right. There, in front of him, stood a wide open door. Beverly stared. His breath came with happiness and surprise. It was open. The door to Master Jefferson's room was open. Beverly had been in there many times with Mama, but never ever when Master Jefferson was home. When Master Jefferson was home, he kept the door locked. He did not want his papers or his books or his self disturbed. Only Burwell and Beverly's Mama had keys to the door. Even Miss Martha had to stay out. Beverly peeked inside. Nobody. The fire had burned down, but a new pile of wood waited by the swept hearth, so Beverly knew Burwell had come and gone. The curtains at the open windows fluttered in the breeze. Beverly took a cautious step. The room sure looked different with Master Jefferson home. When he was gone, Mama kept the desk swept bare of all the books shut up safe in cabinets behind the glass. Now piles of books covered the floor and tables. Some had scraps of paper or ribbons sticking out of their sides, and one lay upside down on the polished wooden desk with half its pages cut and the paper knife lying beside it. Then Beverly saw, beside the cut half book, the violin. He sucked in his breath fast. His heart hammered. Oh, that violin! How he loved the sound of that violin. Master Jefferson had brought it with him from Washington, and sometimes in the evenings Beverly could hear its music all the way down Mulberry Row. Sharp, quick notes, long dancing bits, ta-dum-dum, ta-dee. He'd never heard anything like it. Better than inebriation or the sounds of words in French was the glorious music from Master Jefferson's violin. Beverly crept forward. He'd never seen a violin up close before. Now he stood over it, admiring the shiny, honey-colored wood. Next to it was the stick thing you drew across the strings. Beverly reached out and touched the stick just once. His fingers kept moving and brushed the smooth wood of the violin itself. He thought he could feel the music inside. Right on the bottom was the dark spot where you were supposed to put your chin. He'd watched Master Jefferson through the open windows one night. Quick as a flash, before he could think hard enough to make himself stop, Beverly tucked Master Jefferson's violin beneath his chin. He pushed on the strings beneath his fingers of his left hand and curled his right hand around the stick. He told himself to not make a sound. Burwell would hear, Miss Martha would hear. He would be in a heap of trouble, and Mama would be upset, but he couldn't stop. He raised the stick in the air, and right behind him, a soft voice said, "You're not holding the bow right." If you want to find out who is catching Beverly in Master Jefferson's office and what happens to him and the rest of his siblings on Monticello, definitely pick up a copy of Jefferson's Sons. I know you are going to love this story. Thank you so much for being here for First Chapter Friday. I hope you'll come again for another story. See you again next time. Happy reading. Today's mystery quote says, "There's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." To continue reading Jefferson's Sons by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley, pick up a copy from your school library, purchase one from your favorite local indie bookstore, or grab it via the links in the video description box. Then be sure to check out the rest of the First Chapter Friday playlist. I've got over 150 middle grade and young adult novels in all sorts of genres and formats waiting for you. Thanks so much for visiting my channel, Learning with the Word Nerd. I hope you'll come again for more First Chapter Fridays, brain breaks, direct teaching videos, and more. I'll see you again next time. Happy reading.